There is a photograph of her, a single photograph taken when she was 20 years old, dark hair pulled back, eyes that look directly at the camera. She is beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with softness. She looks like someone who has already decided something. On a Friday afternoon in Lucca, Italy, a doctor came to examine a young woman's hands. He had been sent by the church. His job was simple: find the explanation. He wetted a cloth, he washed the wounds, the blood stopped, the marks disappeared. He turned to the bishop standing in the room and said, "Hysteria, she is doing this to herself." Pins and needles. The bishop had known her since she was a little girl. He had been her confessor for years. He looked at the doctor and said with vehemence, "I cannot believe this child capable of such deceitful tricks." Two men in that room, one looking for evidence, one looking at a person he knew. Neither of them knew what to do with her. Her name was Gemma Galgani. She was 20 years old in that photograph. She would be dead within 2 years, and the Catholic Church would call her the most beautiful flower of the 20th century. But before we talk about what she became, we need to talk about what she gave up to get there, because the list is not short, and it is not comfortable, and it raises a question that her story forces into the open, whether you want it to or not. Gemma Galgani was born in 1878 in Tuscany, fourth of 8 children. Her father was a pharmacist, her mother was devout. For a few years, her life was ordinary in all the ways that matter. Then her mother died. Gemma was 7. She was the oldest daughter. In 1885, that was not a description, it was a job. She raised the younger ones, she ran the house, she was 7 years old. By 18, her father was gone too. The debts from years of illness had taken the pharmacy, the house, everything. Gemma was 20 years old, educated by every account, genuinely beautiful, and completely dependent on the charity of relatives who had very specific ideas about what she should do next. Marry, build a life, stop with the praying. 2 men proposed to her. She said no, twice. Her relatives did not understand it. From where they stood, it is hard to blame them. Here was a young woman with no money, no protection, no future she could see, turning down the one door that was actually open to her. For what? For hours on her knees, for a convent that had not yet agreed to take her. It looked like self-destruction dressed up as holiness. But Gemma had decided. She wanted to enter a Passionist convent, to give her life to God completely, formally, permanently. That was not a phase. That was not grief. That was the one thing she had been moving towards since she was a child. She applied. The convent said no. Her spine had been ravaged by tuberculosis as a teenager. She had survived it, barely. But her health was fragile. She had no dowry to offer, and the Reverend Mother, having heard about Gemma's extraordinary mystical experiences, decided that such a mystic or possible hysteric would not be suitable for their community. The refusal, by all accounts, was not gentle. The institution she loved more than anything in her life looked at her and turned her away. Most people at that point would have reconsidered. Gemma did not reconsider. What happened next is where this story stops being about faith and starts being about something much harder to look at directly. In June of 1899, on a Thursday evening, Gemma Galgani began to bleed. her hands, her feet, her sight. The wounds appeared during prayer and stayed through Friday afternoon. Then they closed. The skin healed completely. By Sunday, there was almost nothing left except faint white marks on her skin. And then the following Thursday, they came back. This happened every week for more than a year. She wore gloves to Mass so nobody would see. She asked God to take it away. She was not proud of it. She wanted to be ordinary. She wanted to walk into a convent and disappear quietly into a life of prayer like thousands of women before her. Instead, she was becoming something the church had not seen in a very long time. And the church did not know what to do with that. Her confessor brought in a doctor, a skeptic, a man whose job was to find the explanation that did not require anything beyond the ordinary. He came on a Friday, during the hours when the wounds were open and bleeding. He wetted a cloth and washed her hands and her head. The blood stopped immediately. The marks disappeared. There, he said, hysteria, they do this to themselves. Monsignor Volpi, who had known Gemma since childhood, stood in that room and refused to accept it. I cannot believe this child capable of such deceitful tricks. But the word had been said, hysteria, and once that word is in the air, it does not leave easily. Her own brothers mocked her. Her sister Angelina brought friends to the house specifically to watch and laugh during Gemma's ecstasies. A priest who had known her since she was small was convinced she was performing. And Gemma, in the middle of all of this, wrote a letter to her confessor. She wrote, "It may be, as the doctor has said, that it is hysteria. Even should it be so, Jesus loves me." She's not defending herself, she's not arguing, she's not asking anyone to believe her. She is saying, even if you are all right, even if I am broken in the way you think I am broken, that does not change what I know. That does not change what is real to me. That is not the statement of someone who has lost their mind. That is the statement of someone who has decided that external validation is simply not the point. But here is what that decision cost her. She let her body deteriorate as an act of devotion. The tuberculosis came back, and this time she did not fight it. Not really. She had already decided that the body was something to be given, not kept. She was 22, 23, 24. The women who lived with her said you could not tell, being around her, how much she was suffering. They said she was joyful, that she laughed, that she was present in a way that made people feel seen. And that is perhaps the most heartbreaking detail in all of this, because Gemma Galgani was not a woman without joy. She was a woman who took everything that could have been a life, a body, a future, a family of her own, and fed it piece by piece into something she loved more than any of it. She died on April the 11th, 1903. She was 25 years old. The Passionist sisters, who had never accepted her into their order while she was alive, dressed her body in their habit for burial. 30 years later, the church beatified her. 7 years after that, they canonized her. Pope Pius XII called her the most beautiful flower of his pontificate. She had finally been accepted. It had only taken dying. The church did not canonize Gemma Galgani for her stigmata. People assumed that the wounds, the visions, the extraordinary phenomena, that those were what made her a saint. But the Vatican was careful to separate the two things. They canonized her for her virtue, for the quality of her character under impossible pressure, for the fact that, by every account of the people who lived alongside her, she was someone worth being around. The miracles were noted and then officially set aside, which means the church itself, at least on paper, was not saying bleed for God and you will be rewarded. It was saying something quieter, something that gets lost in the way her story gets told. It was saying she loved well, under conditions that made loving very difficult. That is what matters. But the way her story gets told does not say that. The way her story gets told says this: look at what she gave up. Look at how little she kept for herself. Look at how completely she was consumed. And is that not beautiful? And for a certain kind of faith, yes, it is. Gemma's path was real. Her love was real. What she felt in those hours of prayer, what she wrote about in her letters, the intimacy with God that comes through in her words with a directness that is almost uncomfortable to read. That was not performance. That was not destruction for its own sake. That was a woman who had found the thing that made her feel most alive, and she ran toward it with everything she had. Her path deserves more than respect, but her story forces a question into the open. If the models of female devotion that get held up most often are women who stopped eating, who refused their bodies, who died young and were accepted in death by institutions that had no room for them in life, what does that tell the woman sitting in the pew today? What does it tell her about what her faith is supposed to cost? Because there is another woman in this story. She does not have a feast day. She does not have a sanctuary anywhere. She is the woman who also loves God and who also loves being a woman, who loves her body, who wants to build something rather than consume herself, who wants to raise children or create things or simply move through the world feeling whole, feeling present, feeling like her femininity is not an obstacle to her faith, but part of it. That woman exists. She has always existed, and she has spent a very long time being handed, not always in words, but in the images and the stories and the models that get passed to her, the idea that her version of devotion is the lesser one, that the truly faithful woman is the one who disappears, who shrinks, who offers herself up until there is nothing left. A woman who is at peace with herself, who does not experience her own desires as enemies to be defeated, who does not hate her body for being alive. That woman does not love God less. She may love Him more honestly, because you cannot give what you have spent your whole life destroying. Gemma Galgani was accepted by the institution she loved the moment she stopped being inconvenient to it. She had finally been let in. It had only taken dying. But here is what that joy cost her. The convent never took her, not while she was alive. The church she gave her body to literally never made room for her inside its walls. She spent her last years in someone else's house, with someone else's family, offering the only thing left that no institution could refuse, her own deterioration. That is not a love story with a happy ending. That is a woman who had nowhere left to put her faith except into her own suffering, and the church canonized her for it, called her beautiful, built a sanctuary in her name in the city that had watched her die at 25. You are allowed to find that complicated. You are allowed to love your faith and also refuse to see your body as the price of it. To be a woman who takes up space, who wants things, who builds a life rather than dissolving into one, who wears her devotion like something that belongs to her, not like something she owes. That is not a lesser faith. It is just a faith that does not require you to disappear to prove it is real. Gemma Galgani was joyful, and she was alone, and she was sick, and she was 25, and the doors were still closed. Both things were true.